This might be controversial, but not every student struggling needs OT. That sentence gets attention because it touches a lot on our discomfort in our field. Today, I want to unpack why this topic feels so uncomfortable, how to recognize when occupational therapy might not be right for intervention, and what that decision really means. My goal is to give practical guidance so teams can make ethical, evidence-based decisions without carrying that unnecessary guilt. Why is this hard to talk about? Well, there are a few common reasons people feel uneasy when we suggest that OT might not be needed. First, there's a real fear of saying no. Saying a student doesn't qualify or doesn't need direct services can feel like letting someone fall through the cracks. Second, the school teams often pressure therapists to provide services because everyone wants to help. That pressure can blur clinical judgment and team decision-making. Third, confusion between eligibility and services muddles the water. A student can be eligible for special education supports, without needing direct OT, and vice versa. Fourth, therapists sometimes should shoulder the responsibility alone, feeling they have to solve every problem on their own instead of engaging the team and using classroom-based strategies. Recognizing those dynamics helps us step back and make clear decisions. So what are some clear indicators OT may not be needed? There are concrete situations where occupational therapy might not be the appropriate or necessary service. These are not about undervaluing student struggles, but about matching intervention to the need. The student can physically or cognitively perform the skill, but lacks motivation or opportunity. If the barrier is engagement, classroom routines, or reinforcement rather than skill deficit, OT might not be the answer. Behavioral or instructional supports could be more effective. That's one example. Another one is the needs are instructional, not access-based. So if the primary issue is learning content or following instructional strategies, interventions from teachers or specialized academic staff may be more appropriate than occupational therapy. Another example is accommodations already meet the need. Sometimes a few reasonable adjustments like preferential seating, modified materials, extended time, allow that student to access learning without direct occupational therapy services. If accommodations are producing the same desired effect, adding OT might be redundant. So another example, progress is happening without direct services. If a student is making progress towards educational goals through classroom-based strategies, learning supports, or other therapies, direct OT might not be necessary. So monitoring and collaboration can continue without formal direct therapy service sessions. Another one is OT goals aren't clearly linked to educational participation. So occupational therapy in schools should focus on improving access to education, not just isolated skills. So if the goals don't map to meaningful participation in school activities, reassess whether OT really is the best fit. What this doesn't mean is saying OT isn't needed doesn't mean abandonment. It doesn't mean we ignore a student's struggles or withdraw support. It also isn't gatekeeping. There's a difference between denying services arbitrarily and making a clinically justified decision based on evidence and team's input. When done thoughtfully, choosing not to provide direct OT is an ethical and appropriate part of service delivery. It prioritizes the student's best interests and ensures limited resources are used where they will have the most impact. So how do we reframe the decision? Okay, dismissal from services or non-qualification shouldn't be treated as a skilled clinical decision, should be treated as not a failure. Okay, so strong therapists know when to step back, monitor, and empower teachers and families with strategies rather than immediately providing direct therapy. So that skill protects both the students and therapists. So students receive interventions that match their needs, And therapists avoid spreading themselves too thin or providing services that don't lead to meaningful educational gains. So what are some practical steps for teams? Okay, number one, use clear assessment data to document what the barrier is. So skill deficit, environmental barrier, instructional mismatch. Okay, 2, link any proposed goals to measurable educational participation outcomes. If you can't make that link, reconsider the service model that you're using. Okay, 3, prioritize training and consultative models when appropriate. Coaching teachers, suggesting accommodations, and collaborating on classroom-wide strategies often yield sustainable results. Okay, create a plan to monitor progress after dismissal or non-qualification. So schedule check-ins to ensure that the students who need later support are identified early. Engage families and the IEP in transparent conversations. Explain the rationale, propose supports, and follow-up plans so everyone understands the decision. Okay, so some final thoughts. Deciding not to provide direct OT isn't an easy conversation for any of us, but it's important. Okay, thoughtful, data-driven decision-making protects the student's education and respects professional boundaries. These are the conversations we work through together inside our school-based network. Okay, you don't have to make these decisions alone. The link is in the bio. The link is in the comments. Please check it out and see if it's something that might help you.